Get off this aircraft. You don't belong here. You just made the most expensive mistake of your career.
The slap cracked across the cabin so sharply that even the engine seemed to go quiet. For one long second, nobody moved. Rachel Morgan stood in the aisle of the private charter jet, with her hand still raised, her breathing tight, her face pale with anger she had mistaken for authority. Around her, the business-class cabin froze under soft amber lights. A glass of whiskey trembled in a passenger's hand. Rain tapped against the small oval windows. Somewhere near the front, a phone camera kept recording. Evelyn Brooks did not fall. She did not scream. She simply turned her face back toward Rachel and adjusted her wire rim glasses with 2 careful fingers. The red mark on her cheek was already rising. Rachel stared at her as if waiting for tears, or panic, or surrender. She got none of it. What she saw instead was stillness, not weakness, not fear. Something colder, something settled. Evelyn looked at her and said quietly, "You just made the most expensive mistake of your career." The words did not sound like a threat. That made them worse. Nobody on that aircraft knew who Evelyn Brooks really was. Nobody had cared enough to ask. To them, she was just a black woman in a dark hoodie, damp from the rain, pulling a worn carry-on bag across a private airfield outside Teterboro. No jewelry, no assistant, no designer coat, no loud announcement of importance. So they decided in seconds what she was worth. Less than the leather seats, less than the schedule, less than the comfort of the people already seated. It had started 20 minutes earlier, when Evelyn climbed the short metal stairs into the jet. The aircraft was operated by Crestline Air, a luxury charter company with polished brochures, expensive promises, and a culture no investor presentation could fully hide. Rachel greeted the couple ahead of Evelyn with a bright smile. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Ellison. Welcome back." Then Evelyn stepped through the doorway. Rachel's smile changed. It did not disappear all at once. It cooled at the edges. "Boarding confirmation," she said. Evelyn handed over her phone. Rachel looked at the screen for too long. Seat 3A. Full fare. Confirmed. Behind her, Todd Bennett, a silver-haired businessman with a flushed face and a half-empty whiskey glass, leaned out from his seat. "You sure you're on the right plane, sweetheart?" The couple across the aisle looked down at their water glasses. Evelyn said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence made some people reveal themselves faster than argument ever could. Rachel handed the phone back. "I'll need to verify this." "It's already verified," Evelyn said. Rachel's jaw tightened. "Please wait here." 3 minutes passed. Todd chuckled under his breath and said something about people wandering into places they did not belong. Rachel returned with no apology. "The booking appears to be in order," she said. "However, due to weight distribution, we'll need you seated toward the rear." Evelyn lifted her eyes. "My seat is 3A. Rachel leaned closer. Her perfume was sharp and floral. Her voice dropped low enough for only Evelyn to hear. "I strongly suggest you don't make this difficult." Evelyn took one small step forward. Not aggressive, just present. "I paid for 3A. I would like to sit in 3A." Rachel's face hardened. Todd watched with a grin. The cabin waited. Then Rachel's hand moved, fast. Open-palmed, final. The sound split the air. Now, in the silence after it, Rachel seemed almost surprised by what her own hand had done. But pride arrived before remorse could. "This flight is departing shortly," she said, forcing her voice steady. "Any further disruption will result in your removal from the aircraft." Evelyn held her gaze for one more breath. Then she turned and walked to the rear of the cabin. Every step was measured. Every eye followed her. At the back, she sat down, placed her carry-on beneath the seat, and folded her hands in her lap. The rain kept striking the windows. The cabin lights hummed. The passengers pretended to look elsewhere. But one person did not look away. Emily Carter, the youngest flight attendant on board, stood half-hidden near the galley. Her stomach had gone cold. She had seen rude passengers. She had seen difficult crew. But this was different. Because the woman in the hoodie was not acting like someone who had been defeated. She was acting like someone who had just made a decision. Rachel moved through the cabin as if nothing had happened. That was what made it worse. She adjusted a champagne flute near the front. She smiled at Todd Bennett. She asked the Ellisons if the cabin temperature was comfortable. Her voice had returned to its polished rhythm, smooth enough to cover almost anything. But Emily could still hear the slap. It stayed in the air. It lived under the engine hum, under the rain against the windows, under every fake little courtesy. Rachel performed for everyone except the woman in the back. Evelyn Brooks sat alone beside the last window. Her cheek was still red. Her glasses sat straight on her face now. Her hands were folded over one another, still and careful, like she was holding herself in place by discipline alone. Todd lifted his whiskey and called toward the front, loud enough for Evelyn to hear. "Now this is what I call good service." Rachel gave him a short laugh. Not too much. Just enough. Emily felt her throat tighten. She had been working for Crestline Air for 14 months. Long enough to know the rules. Long enough to know which rules mattered and which rules were used when someone needed to be put in their place. Rachel had been with the company for almost a decade. She knew every executive passenger by face, every wealthy regular by drink order, every silent power game that happened in private aviation. Emily had learned from her. Until tonight, she had also feared her. "Emily," Rachel said, turning sharply. "Galley, now." Emily stepped back as Rachel approached. The older woman's perfume cut through the smell of cedar and rain-damp coats. "Stop staring," Rachel said under her breath. "I wasn't. You were." Rachel's smile stayed in place, but her eyes were flat. "That passenger is trying to create a scene. Do not reward it." Emily looked past her, toward the back of the cabin. Evelyn had not moved. She had not called anyone. She had not asked for help. "She didn't create the scene," Emily said softly. Rachel's face changed. "Only a little, but enough." "Careful," she whispered. "You are very new here." The warning landed exactly where Rachel intended. Emily felt it in her stomach. Rent, student loans, her mother's prescriptions back in Ohio, a job she had worked hard to get. All of it flashed through her mind in one cold sweep. Then Rachel turned away and carried warm nuts to Todd in a white ceramic bowl. Emily stood frozen for half a breath. Then she moved into the galley. The company tablet was clipped beside the service drawer. Her hands shook as she unlocked it. She told herself she was checking the manifest. That was normal. That was allowed. She needed to confirm the passenger name. Nothing more. Her finger scrolled down the list. Ellison, Bennett, Brooks, Evelyn Brooks. The name struck some hidden place in her memory. Emily frowned. She had seen it before, not on a passenger list, not in a magazine at the grocery store. Somewhere official, somewhere important. She tapped the profile. A small note appeared beside the name. VIP Investor Review Flag. Emily stopped breathing. Crestline used flags for celebrities, government contractors, board members, and major investors. Ordinary wealthy passengers did not get that marker. Not even Todd Bennett, who liked to talk about his vacation homes and his private equity friends. Emily tapped again. The satellite connection dragged slowly. A small wheel spun on the screen. In the cabin, Rachel laughed at something Todd said. At the rear window, Evelyn watched the black sky without expression. The profile loaded. Emily read the first line. Evelyn Brooks, founder and chief executive officer of Brooks Dynamics. Her hands went cold. She read the next lines faster. Artificial intelligence infrastructure. Government contracts. Public company. Estimated personal net worth in the billions. Silent stakeholder in aviation and logistics assets. Then she saw Crestline, 11% indirect equity position through a private holding company. Emily gripped the edge of the counter. No. She scrolled lower. Pending strategic rescue investment. $250 million. Final signing scheduled for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The cabin seemed to tilt. Rachel had not slapped a confused passenger. She had not slapped a woman trying to steal a seat. She had slapped the person who was about to keep Crestline alive. Emily looked back through the galley curtain. Rachel was pouring Todd another drink. Evelyn was still silent. And somehow that silence now felt enormous. It filled the aircraft. It pressed against the windows. It wrapped around every person who had chosen comfort over courage. Emily picked up the tablet again. Her thumb hovered over the incident reporting icon. She knew what Rachel would do if she found out. She knew what silence would do if she did nothing. For the first time that night, Emily understood that keeping a job and keeping your conscience were not always the same thing. Emily did not file the report yet. Her courage had risen, but not enough to carry her all the way across the line. Not while the jet was still in the air. Not while Rachel was only a few feet away, moving through the cabin with that calm, dangerous control of someone who believed the rules belonged to her. So Emily did the next best thing. She saved everything. She took screenshots of the manifest, the investor flag, the pending transaction note, the ownership line. She attached them to a draft report and locked the tablet screen just as Rachel stepped into the galley. "What are you doing?" Rachel asked. Emily turned too quickly. "Inventory." Rachel looked at the tablet, then at Emily's face. "For someone doing inventory, you look very concerned." Emily forced her hands to stop shaking. "We are low on tonic water." Rachel stared at her for another second, then she smiled. It was not kind, then write it down. She reached over Emily and took a bottle of water from the drawer. As she passed back into the cabin, she paused and stopped looking at the passenger in the rear. People like that feed on attention. The words that sat in the galley after she left. People like that. Emily closed her eyes. At the back of the cabin, Evelyn heard it. Not clearly, not every word, but enough. She did not react. Her life had taught her that certain sentences did not need perfect volume to be understood. They carried their meaning in the shape of the room. She turned her face toward the window. Below the jet, the northeast was a scattered field of lights under storm clouds. Roads glowed like thin gold wires. Towns appeared and vanished beneath the wing. It was peaceful from this height, almost merciful. Evelyn had built Brooks Dynamics by learning to see what other people missed. Patterns, weak points. Systems that looked strong because everyone was afraid to touch them. Crestline had been one of those systems. For 18 months she had studied the company. Its aging fleet contracts. Its debt. Its shrinking margins. Its beautiful public statements about premium care and inclusive service. The language was clean. The numbers were not. The culture, she had suspected, was worse than either. That was why she traveled quietly. No security team, no publicist, no tailored suit. Just a hoodie, glasses, and the kind of ordinary suitcase that made people decide what they thought they knew. She never enjoyed what that revealed. But it was useful. Tonight it had revealed too much. Near the front, Todd Bennett lifted his glass again. "I'll tell you what," he said, leaning toward the Ellisons. "Private aviation is the last place where standards still mean something." Mrs. Ellison's fingers tightened around her napkin. Her husband looked at the window, pretending he had not heard. Todd was not drunk enough to be unaware. He was only drunk enough to be honest. Rachel returned with his drink. "Anything else, Mr. Bennett?" He smiled at her, just keeping the cabin civilized. Rachel gave that same short laugh again. Emily heard it from the galley. This time, something inside her hardened. She stepped out before she could talk herself out of it and walked toward the cockpit door. Captain Mark Reynolds stood half-turned in the narrow space outside it, checking a weather update on his tablet. He was in his early 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of pilot who seemed carved from procedure and caution. "Captain Reynolds," Emily said quietly. He did not look up. "Yes, I need to report something about what happened during boarding." Now he looked at her. His eyes were tired, not cruel, just impatient. "Rachel already briefed me." Emily swallowed. "I don't think you have the full information." He lowered the tablet. "Emily, we are descending soon. Unless there is a current safety issue, this can wait." It was an assault. The word came out sharper than she intended. The captain's face tightened. Rachel appeared behind Emily as if summoned by instinct. "Is there a problem?" Rachel asked. Emily turned. Her heart thudded once. Hard. Captain Reynolds looked between them. Rachel spoke first. Smooth, controlled. "Our junior attendant is upset because a passenger became confrontational during boarding. I handled it." Emily's voice shook, but she did not lower it. "You hit her." Rachel's eyes flashed. The captain inhaled slowly through his nose. He looked toward the cabin, then back at Emily. "Did anyone require medical assistance?" Emily stared at him. That was the wrong question. They all know. she said. But that does not make it acceptable. Rachel stepped closer. You need to go prepare the cabin. Emily looked at the captain one more time. He looked away first, and that was when she understood. The system was not asleep. It was awake. It was choosing. She walked back to the galley with her throat burning. The jet began its descent. The seatbelt sign chimed overhead, bright and final. In the rear, Evelyn reached into the pocket of her hoodie and touched her phone. Not yet, but soon. The runway lights rose through the rain like a line of white fire. Evelyn watched them from the rear window, her face reflected faintly in the dark glass. The red mark on her cheek had deepened. It no longer stung as much. That was always how humiliation worked. The first pain faded. The memory stayed. The landing gear dropped beneath the jet with a heavy mechanical thud. Across the cabin, Rachel stood braced near the forward galley, one hand on the cabinet latch, her posture perfect. She had the look of a woman who believed the night was almost over. One difficult passenger, one uncomfortable moment, one story that would disappear once everyone went home. People like Rachel often mistook silence for surrender. Evelyn had built her life on the opposite truth. Silence could be a ledger. It could record every insult, every witness, every choice. The wheels touched down hard, throwing a tremor through the cabin. Mrs. Ellison gasped softly and grabbed her husband's sleeve. Todd Bennett laughed. Bit of a landing, he said. Rachel smiled from the front. Weather's been rough all evening, Mr. Bennett. No one asked Evelyn if she was all right. Emily heard that absence like a bell. When the jet slowed and turned off the runway, Emily moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and loose items. Her face was composed, but inside, something was cracking open. She had watched the captain look away. She had watched Rachel rewrite the truth in real time. She had watched passengers decide that comfort mattered more than courage. Then she reached Evelyn's row. For the first time all night, Evelyn looked directly at her. Emily stopped. It lasted only a second, maybe less. But in that second, Emily felt seen, not judged, not rescued. Seen, I'm sorry, Emily whispered. Rachel's voice cut from the front. Emily. Forward cabin. Emily straightened. Yes. Evelyn gave the smallest nod. That nod nearly broke her. The jet rolled toward the private terminal at Teterboro, where black cars waited under silver rain. The clock above the cabin door read 11:47 in the evening. Rachel opened the door after the stairway locked into place. Damp night air rushed in, smelling of jet fuel and wet pavement. Thank you for flying Crestline Air, Rachel said to the Ellisons. Warm again. We hope to see you soon. Mr. Ellison gave an uneasy nod. His wife avoided looking back. Todd stepped into the aisle last among the forward passengers, moving slowly, whiskey still thick in his voice. Great job tonight, he told Rachel. You handled that. Rachel's smile widened. Safe travels, Mr. Bennett. As he passed the rear cabin, Todd tilted his head toward Evelyn. Hope you learned something, sweetheart. Evelyn stood. She lifted her carry-on from under the seat. Her hands were steady. I did, she said. Todd frowned, unsure whether he had been insulted. She walked past him without another word. Rachel did not look at her. Not really. She aimed her gaze just above Evelyn's shoulder, the way people look past someone they have chosen not to recognize. Good night, Rachel said, empty and formal. Evelyn paused at the doorway. Rain blew against her hoodie. The stairs waited. The terminal lights glowed beyond the wing. She turned slightly, enough for Rachel to hear. It will be. Then she descended into the rain. A driver in a dark suit opened the rear door of a black Lincoln waiting near the terminal fence. His name was Paul Davis. He had driven Evelyn for 6 years and knew better than to ask questions when she looked like that. He saw the mark on her cheek. His jaw tightened. Ms. Brooks, he said quietly. Not here, she replied. He nodded and closed the door behind her. Inside the car, the world became soft and dark. Rain traced crooked lines down the tinted window. The jet sat behind her, bright and expensive, already shrinking into the past. Evelyn took out her phone. Her first call went to Daniel Reed, her lead counsel. He answered on the second ring. His voice was alert, even before she spoke. Evelyn? Cancel the signing. There was no pause. All of it? All of it. Daniel exhaled once. Not shock. Confirmation. Effective 3 in the morning thing. Standard withdrawal, no explanation. Understood. She ended the call and placed the phone in her lap. For a moment, she did nothing. She let herself feel the weight of it. $250 million. Months of negotiations. Jobs that might be saved. A company that needed rescuing. Then she touched her cheek. A company that could not recognize the humanity of one woman in a hoodie had no right asking her to save its future. Her second call was to Sarah Mitchell, her assistant. Sarah answered as if midnight were business hours. Yes, Evelyn. Cancel tomorrow morning. Clear the calendar until noon. Crestline? Yes. Another small silence. Then Sarah said, I'll handle it. Evelyn looked out at the rain. No statement. Understood. The car pulled away from the terminal. Behind her, inside the jet, Emily stood in the galley with the tablet pressed against her chest. Rachel was laughing with a ground crew supervisor near the open door. Emily unlocked the screen. Her draft report waited. Her thumb hovered. Then she pressed send. Emily's report landed in 3 inboxes at 12:34 in the morning. One belonged to Human Resources. One belonged to the Director of Passenger Services. One belonged to the Executive Assistant of William Harrison, the Chief Executive Officer of Crestline Air. Nobody read it right away. That was how companies failed long before the public ever saw the collapse. Not with one explosion. Not with one headline. They failed in small, quiet moments, when the warning was already sitting there, marked urgent, waiting for someone with power to care. Emily sat alone in the empty aircraft after the ground crew left. The cabin lights had been dimmed. The leather seats looked ghostly in the low glow. Rachel had gone into the terminal without speaking to her. Captain Reynolds had signed the flight log and disappeared toward crew transport. Emily remained in the rear row, the same row where Evelyn sat. The tablet rested on her knees. Her report was plain, specific, no dramatic words. Time of boarding, seat assignment, passenger name. Rachel's refusal to honor the confirmed booking, the slap, Captain Reynolds being notified. Rachel's statement in the galley. The investor profile. The pending rescue investment. The screenshots. At the bottom, Emily had written one sentence she almost deleted. I believe this passenger was treated differently because of her appearance and race. She had stared at that sentence for nearly a minute before pressing send. Now her body felt hollow. At 2:58 in the morning, Daniel Reed's law firm sent a formal notice to Crestline Air. It was brief, clean, devastating. At 3 o'clock, William Harrison's phone lit up on the nightstand of his brownstone in Georgetown. He woke because he had trained himself to wake for certain names. Daniel Reed was one of them. The signing was supposed to happen at 9. The $250 million rescue package was supposed to calm lenders, satisfy the board, and give Crestline breathing room for the first time in years. William sat up and read the message. Then he read it again. His wife stirred beside him. Bill? He did not answer. He reached for his glasses with hands that no longer felt steady. The offer had been withdrawn, effective immediately. No further comment, no request to reschedule, no soft language, no door left open. William felt the room shift around him. He opened his email and saw the forwarded report from his assistant. The subject line was marked urgent. Incident involving Evelyn Brooks. The name alone made his stomach tighten. He opened it. By the time he finished reading, the lamp was on, his wife was awake, and William was sitting on the edge of the bed in silence. What happened? She asked. He looked down at the phone in his hand. We may have just lost the company. By 5:15, William had called the board chair, the general counsel, the chief financial officer, and the head of investor relations. No one sounded fully awake at first. Then they heard the name Evelyn Brooks, and sleep left every voice. By 6, the first emergency call began. By 6:40, a junior employee in investor relations made the mistake that turns a private crisis into a public one. He mentioned to a market contact that a planned capital announcement might be delayed. That contact understood what delay meant. By 7:12, a financial news service published a short item. Crestline Air faces uncertainty after reported withdrawal of major rescue investor. It was only 4 paragraphs. It was enough. At Crestline headquarters in Manhattan, the lights were coming on floor by floor. Assistants walked faster than usual. Lawyers arrived without coffee. A communications director stood in a conference room and whispered, "Do we know why she pulled out?" Nobody answered. Then the general counsel opened Emily's report on the large screen. The room went still. There was no commentary as the security footage loaded. Just the soft hum of the projector. The video had no sound at first. It did not need sound. They watched Evelyn step into the cabin. They watched Rach block her. They watched the exchange. Then Rachel's arm moved. Fast, open-palmed. Final. The slap landed in silence, but every person in that room heard it anyway. William Harrison covered his mouth with one hand. Across the table, the board chair closed her eyes. Someone whispered, "Good God." No one defended Rachel now. No one spoke of difficult passengers. No one mentioned procedure. Because power had entered the room at last. And with it came the truth everyone should have cared about, before money made it impossible to ignore. At 7:49, William said the only words he could find. "What have we done?" Rachel Morgan's company phone stopped working at 8:59. At first, she thought the battery had died. She stood in the crew lounge at Teterboro, still in uniform, coffee cooling in her hand, and tapped the black screen with growing irritation. Around her, 2 pilots were watching the morning news without sound. A baggage coordinator argued quietly into a headset. The world looked normal. Then her personal phone buzzed. "Report to Crestline headquarters immediately. Security will meet you in the lobby." Rachel read the message twice. Her first feeling was annoyance. Not fear, annoyance. In her mind, last night had been unpleasant, but contained. A passenger had challenged her authority. She had acted firmly, perhaps too firmly. But private aviation was built on keeping control. That was what passengers paid for. Order, discretion, standards. She told herself this while ordering a car. She told herself this while fixing her lipstick in the restroom mirror. She told herself this while ignoring the faint memory of Evelyn Brooks standing in the aisle, one cheek red. Eyes quiet enough to terrify a stronger person. By 10:38, Rachel walked through the glass doors of Crestline's Manhattan office. The lobby was bright, polished, and cold. White marble floors, fresh orchids. A wall screen playing a silent loop of smiling crews and wealthy passengers. The company's slogan glowed behind the reception desk. Excellence in every journey. A security guard stepped forward. "Ms. Morgan? Yes, I need your access badge." Rachel blinked. "Excuse me? Your badge, Mom?" His voice was polite. That made it worse. People turned their heads. A receptionist looked down quickly. Rachel felt heat move up her neck. There must be some mistake. "I was instructed to collect it." She unclipped the badge from her jacket and placed it in his hand. It felt absurdly small for something that had once opened every door in the building. He led her to a conference room on the 2nd floor. No windows. A glass pitcher of water sat untouched in the center of the table. 2 people from Human Resources waited with a woman from Legal. None of them smiled. Rachel sat. She folded her hands. "I assume this is about last night," she said. The legal representative, a woman named Karen Whitlow, opened a folder. "Yes." Rachel gave a controlled breath. The passenger was confrontational from the moment she boarded. "I followed escalation protocol. I will admit the situation became tense, but I was maintaining cabin safety." No one interrupted. That gave Rachel confidence. She refused instructions. She challenged seating assignments. She created discomfort for other premium passengers. "I have worked for Crestline for almost 10 years. I know when a situation is headed in the wrong direction." Karen looked at her for a long moment. Then she slid a photograph across the table. Rachel looked down. It was a still image from the cabin camera. Her arm was extended. Evelyn's head was turned from the impact. The frame was clear, brutal, undeniable. Rachel's mouth went dry. "That image has been preserved from aircraft security footage," Karen said. "We also have a written incident report, the passenger manifest, internal investor records, and at least one passenger video." Rachel stared at the photograph. For the first time, she saw what others would see. Not a senior attendant maintaining order. Not a professional under pressure. A woman in uniform striking a passenger who had done nothing violent. A black woman seated where she had paid to sit. Still, remorse did not arrive first. Fear did. "Who is she?" Rachel asked. The HR director leaned back slightly. Her expression changed in a way Rachel did not like. Karen answered. "Evelyn Brooks." The name floated in the room. Rachel knew it now. Everyone knew it now. Brooks Dynamics. Federal contracts. The quiet billionaire who had been rumored to be behind Crestline's rescue financing. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. She was the investor? Karen did not soften. She was the investor. The words struck harder than any accusation. Outside that room, the morning was turning against Crestline. The first financial headline had spread. Then another. Then a third. By late morning, business channels were asking why a major rescue investment had disappeared hours before signing. By noon, social media had found the passenger video. Blurry at first. Then clearer. A woman in a hoodie. A slap. A cabin full of silence. Emily Carter watched the clip from her apartment, still in yesterday's clothes, hands wrapped around a mug she had not touched. Todd Bennett saw it too, from the back seat of a car, and quickly deleted a post he had made about excellent service. Mrs. Ellison sat at her kitchen table and cried without fully understanding why. Maybe because she had been there. Maybe because she had said nothing. In the windowless room, Rachel kept looking at the photograph. She wanted to say she had not known who Evelyn was, but somewhere deep inside, beneath the panic and the shame, she understood the terrible truth. That explanation would not save her. It would condemn her. By noon, the story no longer belonged to Crestline. It belonged to everyone who had ever been looked over, questioned, followed, doubted, or asked to prove they belonged in a place they had already earned the right to enter. The first video was grainy. A phone held at an awkward angle. Rain streaked across the cabin window behind Evelyn. Rachel's white sleeve flashed through the frame. Then the slap. Quick, sharp, ugly. The second video was clearer. Someone near the aisle had captured Todd Bennett laughing afterward, captured Rachel smiling at him, captured Evelyn walking to the rear of the cabin alone, carrying herself with a kind of quiet dignity that made the cruelty around her look smaller and meaner by comparison. By 1:15, the clips were on every major platform. By 2, Crestline's largest corporate sponsor announced it was reviewing its partnership. By 2:30, another sponsor paused a campaign scheduled to launch the following week. By 3, cable news had the footage on a loop. In a studio in Midtown Manhattan, a veteran anchor named Christine Wallace sat behind a glass desk, watching the clip before going live. She had covered market crashes, government hearings, airline disasters, and corporate scandals. Still, she pressed her lips together when the slap landed on screen. "That is hard to watch," she said to her producer. "It's worse with the context," the producer replied through her earpiece. "That's Evelyn Brooks." Christine looked up. The name changed the story for markets. It did not change the moral fact. That was what bothered her most. Across the city, Evelyn sat in her office on the 32nd floor of Brooks Dynamics headquarters. The space was calm and spare. No wall of awards. No dramatic skyline performance. Just glass, warm wood, a long table, and the low murmur of people doing serious work. Sarah Mitchell stood near the door with a tablet. "Sylvia is asking whether you want to release a statement." Evelyn looked out at the city. Traffic moved below in slow silver lines. "Not yet." Sarah nodded. She had worked with Evelyn long enough to know that silence, in her hands, was never empty. "Crestline has called Daniel 6 times. Let them call." The board chair asked whether there is any path back to the agreement. Evelyn turned then. Her cheek had faded, but not entirely. A faint shadow remained near the bone. "No." Sarah's face softened. "All right." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Evelyn said, "People will make this about money. They already are. It was never about money. I know." Evelyn looked back toward the window. The money only made them listen. That sentence stayed in the room after she said it. At Crestline headquarters, William Harrison had stopped trying to sit down. He paced the boardroom with his tie loosened and his phone pressed to his ear. "No, we are not calling it a misunderstanding," he snapped. "There is video. There is a victim. There is a crew member on camera striking a passenger. Do not put the word misunderstanding anywhere near this." The communications directors stood by the wall. pale and silent. The general counsel added, "We also need to assume civil exposure. Assault, discrimination, negligent supervision, hostile service environment, possibly more." One board member muttered, "This is a nightmare." The board chair looked at him coldly. "No, a nightmare is something that happens to you. This is something we allowed." The room went quiet. That was the first honest sentence anyone had spoken all day. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in her apartment with the blinds closed. Her television was muted, but her face kept appearing anyway. A still image, her armland's head turned. Experts discussed company culture. Former passengers told stories of being dismissed, ignored, downgraded, searched twice, asked twice, believed last. Rachel changed the channel. There she was again. She turned the television off. Silence filled the room. For years, she had told herself she had high standards, that she protected premium spaces, that she could read people. That experience had sharpened her instincts. Now those instincts were being shown to the world for what they had always been. Not standards, not professionalism. Bias with a polished voice. Her phone buzzed. A message from her attorney. "Do not speak publicly. Do not contact Ms. Brooks directly. We will discuss options tomorrow." Rachel stared at the screen until it blurred. Then she whispered to no one, "I didn't know who she was." The words sounded weak in the empty room. Worse than weak. They sounded revealing. Evelyn waited until the noise had built its own shape before she stepped into it. That was what Sylvia Grant, her public relations counsel, had advised. Not because Evelyn needed protection, because the truth sometimes landed harder when people had already tried and failed to explain it away. The interview was set for 4 o'clock the next afternoon. By then, Crestline had lost more than a rescue deal. It had lost trust. The stock had fallen again before lunch. Sponsors were backing away in language polished by lawyers. Former employees had begun speaking anonymously to reporters about a culture where certain passengers were called difficult before they ever opened their mouths. And across the country, older black travelers were telling stories they had carried for decades. A retired nurse in Atlanta spoke about being asked 3 times to prove she belonged in first class. A pastor in Detroit said he had been followed through a private lounge by staff who never followed anyone else. A grandmother in Phoenix posted that she had stopped dressing comfortably for flights because comfort made people doubt her ticket. Evelyn read some of those stories in silence. Then she closed the tablet. At 3:45, she arrived at the Midtown studio in a dark blazer, simple trousers, and low heels. No entourage. Just Sylvia and Sarah walking a few steps behind her. The makeup artist paused when she saw the faint mark still visible on Evelyn's cheek. "We can cover that," the woman said gently. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror. No. The room became quiet. The mark stayed. Christine Wallace met her outside the set. She was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, composed, and old enough to understand that some interviews were not about catching someone off guard. Some were about making room for the truth to stand still long enough for people to see it. "Ms. Brooks," Christine said, "thank you for being here." Evelyn shook her hand. "Thank you for having me. Are you ready?" Evelyn looked toward the cameras. Yes. The red light came on. Christine began with the facts, the canceled rescue investment, the viral footage, the Crestline statement that had called the event deeply troubling. Then she turned slightly toward Evelyn. "What happened on that aircraft?" Evelyn did not look down. She did not reach for sympathy. She described it plainly. Seat, the questioning, the laughter from another passenger, the refusal to honor her booking, the slap, the silence afterward. Her voice never cracked. That made the story harder to dismiss. Christine listened without interrupting. Then she asked, "How did it feel?" For the first time, Evelyn paused. The studio lights reflected softly in her glasses. Somewhere behind the cameras, a crew member stopped moving. "It felt familiar," Evelyn said. Christine's expression changed. Evelyn continued, slower now. "That may be the part people do not want to hear. The slap was shocking. But the look before it was not. The assumption before it was not. The decision that I did not belong there was not new to me." She breathed in. "The problem is not just that a flight attendant hit me. The problem is that she believed I was safe to mistreat because she had already decided who I was. And that is not only a Crestline problem. That is an everywhere problem. In the control room, no one spoke. Christine leaned forward. Some people have said this became a national story because you are wealthy and powerful. How do you respond to that? Evelyn nodded once, as if she had expected the question. They are right, she said, and that should trouble all of us. Christine stayed still. Evelyn looked directly into the camera now. If I had been a school teacher going home after a long week, would anyone have cared? If I had been a home health aide, a cashier, a grandmother flying to see her family, would that report have reached the boardroom? Would the footage have mattered? I do not know, but I know this. Respect should never depend on whether the person you are facing can cost you money. The words moved fast after that. Clips spread before the interview had even ended. Christine asked whether Evelyn would reconsider the investment. No, Evelyn said. No hesitation. Crestline does not need a branding repair. It needs a culture it has not shown the courage to build. I will not fund a company that only discovers human dignity after a market loss. Then she announced that the capital would move elsewhere. Alder Regional Airlines, a smaller carrier, less glamorous, less famous. But one Evelyn had quietly studied for more than a year. They are not perfect, she said. No company is, but they have shown a willingness to measure respect as seriously as revenue. That matters. By the time Evelyn left the studio, Alder Regional's name was everywhere. At Crestline headquarters, William Harrison watched the interview from the boardroom, with his hands folded in front of him. No one spoke after Evelyn's final answer. There was nothing left to spin. Rachel did not watch the interview when it first aired. She tried not to. She walked through her apartment with the television off and the curtains drawn, folding laundry she did not need to fold, wiping a counter that was already clean. Anything to keep her hands busy. Anything to keep from hearing Evelyn Brooks say the truth out loud in a voice that did not shake. But silence has its own way of accusing a person. By evening, Rachel sat on the edge of her couch and opened her phone. The clip appeared before she searched for it. Evelyn in a dark blazer, calm, composed, the mark still faint on her cheek. The problem is not just that a flight attendant hit me. Rachel's thumb froze. The problem is that she believed I was safe to mistreat, because she had already decided who I was. Rachel locked the phone. Then she unlocked it again. She watched the whole interview. When it ended, her apartment felt smaller than before. The walls seemed closer. The framed travel photographs above her bookshelf looked ridiculous now. Paris, Aspen, Miami, places she had visited while wearing a uniform that made her feel important beside people who were richer than she would ever be. That had been part of it. She knew that now, or she was beginning to. For years, Rachel had borrowed status from the passengers she served. She had learned who mattered, who received eye contact, who got the warm smile, who got the benefit of the doubt. She had told herself it was service. In truth, it had become worship in one direction and suspicion in the other. Her attorney called at 8. "Do not make any public statement," he said. "Crestline is moving toward termination. We may be able to negotiate language." Rachel stared at the muted television. "I want to apologize to her." "No," he said quickly. "Absolutely not. Any contact with Ms. Brooks could expose you further. I hit her. Yes, and that is why you need to let counsel handle this." Rachel closed her eyes. For the first time, the sentence came without defense. "I hit her because I thought she was nobody." The attorney went quiet. Rachel opened her eyes. "That's what this is, isn't it?" He sighed. "Rachel, this is not the time for moral reflection. This is the time for legal caution." But she was past caution now. Not brave, not redeemed, just cornered by the truth. 3 days later, Daniel Reed's office received a request through Rachel's attorney. A private meeting. No press, no cameras, no settlement discussion, just an apology. Daniel advised Evelyn to decline. "You owe her nothing," he said from across Evelyn's office. Evelyn sat behind her desk reading the request once, then again. "I know. She may be trying to soften liability. Maybe. She may want forgiveness for herself, not accountability." "Probably." Daniel leaned back. "Then why consider it?" Evelyn looked toward the window. Late afternoon light moved across the buildings in pale gold. Because people can be consequences and still be human. Daniel said nothing. I am not meeting her to make her feel better, Evelyn continued. I am meeting her because there are things she needs to hear from the person she thought she could erase. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Rachel arrived 15 minutes early at Brooks Dynamics headquarters. She wore a plain gray sweater, black pants, and no makeup beyond what she needed to look awake. Without the Crestline uniform, she looked smaller, not harmless, just stripped of the costume that had once carried her authority. In the lobby, people moved around her without recognizing her. That anonymity struck her harder than she expected. A week earlier, she would have found it insulting. Now it felt deserved. Sarah Mitchell came down to meet her. Ms. Brooks will see you now. Rachel followed her into the elevator. The ride to the 32nd floor was silent, except for the soft mechanical hum. Rachel had rehearsed for days. She had written sentences on legal pads, crossed them out, started over. I was under pressure. I misread the situation. I did not know who you were. By the time the elevator doors opened, she knew all of them were wrong. Sarah led her into a small conference room. No cameras, no lawyers at the table. Just a pitcher of water, 2 glasses, and Evelyn Brooks seated near the window. Evelyn stood. Rachel almost wished she had not. The courtesy made the shame worse. Ms. Morgan, Evelyn said. Rachel swallowed. Ms. Brooks. They sat. For a few seconds, neither woman spoke. Rachel looked at Evelyn's face, at the faint shadow where her hand had landed, and something inside her finally broke in a clean, quiet way. I am sorry, she said. Her voice cracked. She tried again. I am sorry for striking you. I am sorry for humiliating you. I am sorry for treating you as if your dignity depended on whether I recognized your importance. Evelyn watched her without expression. Rachel's hands trembled in her lap. I didn't know who you were, she whispered. The room changed. Evelyn set her coffee down. That, she said softly, is exactly the problem. Evelyn did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Across the table, Rachel Morgan sat with her shoulders drawn inward, as if the room itself had finally become heavier than her pride. The woman who once filled an aircraft aisle with borrowed authority now looked at her own hands like she no longer trusted them. You did not know who I was, Evelyn said, and you think that explains it. Rachel's lips parted, but no answer came. Evelyn leaned back slightly. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried years. That is the part you have to sit with, not the video, not the headlines, not the job you lost. The truth. You believed respect was something I had to earn from you before you gave it. Rachel's eyes filled. I am ashamed, she whispered. You should be, Evelyn said, not cruelly. But shame is only useful if it changes what you do next. The words landed with the quiet force of a verdict. Rachel wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. She looked older than she had on the plane, smaller, but more honest. For the first time, Evelyn saw not an enemy asking to be rescued from consequences, but a person standing at the edge of understanding. That did not erase what happened. It did not make forgiveness automatic. It only made the moment human. Can you forgive me? Rachel asked. Evelyn was silent for a long breath. Outside the window, traffic moved along the avenue in a slow gray stream. People crossed streets, carried coffee, waited for buses, stepped through doors without knowing what rooms might decide about them. I do not know, Evelyn said. That is the honest answer. But my forgiveness is not the work in front of you. Your work is becoming someone who would never do this again, even if the next person has no money, no title, and no power to hurt you back. Rachel lowered her head. The meeting ended there. No hug, no easy release, no public performance of grace. Evelyn stood, and Rachel stood too. For a moment, they faced each other in the quiet room. Then Rachel nodded once, turned, and walked out. Months passed. Crestline survived, but not as the company it had been. William Harrison resigned before the end of the quarter. The board accepted an independent investigation. Several leaders were removed. Rachel was terminated for cause. Captain Reynolds retired early, after the report found he had failed to act on a credible crew complaint. The company issued statements, but statements could not rebuild trust. That work was slower, harder, Less glamorous, new policies were written. Training was rebuilt. Passenger complaints were routed outside the old chain of command. Cameras were reviewed. Conduct was audited. For once, dignity became more than a word in a brochure. But Evelyn did not go back. Her $250 million went to Alder Regional Airlines instead. The agreement was public. The conditions were clear. Respect would be measured. Bias complaints would be investigated by an outside firm. Executive bonuses would depend not only on profit, but on how passengers were treated when no one important seemed to be watching. Emily Carter joined the new passenger experience team 6 weeks later. On her first day, she stood in a training room in Chicago, looking at a group of new hires. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. If something feels wrong, she told them, do not wait for someone more powerful to notice. Sometimes you are the witness. Sometimes that is enough to begin the truth. Evelyn watched from the back of the room, unseen by most of them. She smiled faintly. A year later, she spoke at a mentorship center in the neighborhood where she had grown up. The room was full of young people, parents, teachers, and elders who knew too well what it meant to be underestimated. Evelyn stepped to the microphone without notes. Real power, she said, is not a title. It is not a uniform. It is not money. Real power is knowing who you are when the world tries to make you smaller. And when you finally have enough power to demand change, do not waste it. The room rose to its feet. Evelyn did not linger in the applause. She never had. Outside, the evening light softened the city. Sarah waited by the car with Evelyn's coat. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then Evelyn looked back at the building. She thought of the women whose stories never went viral. The men no one believed. The elders who swallowed humiliation because they were too tired to fight. She thought of every person who had ever walked into a room and been measured wrongly before saying a word. And she hoped this story had reminded someone of a simple truth. Every person deserves respect before they prove a single thing. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes dignity still matters. And tell me in the comments what you would have done if you had been in that cabin.